Welcome to lesson 1 of the Python class. So one thing that you need to know right offhand is Python doesn't have any real object types. It's what's called duck typing. That's duck. So the theory is if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it must be a duck. So the way the Python interpreter works is it tries to determine what an object type is without you trying to just tell it what an object type is. Pretty convenient. So what we're going to do is get started with lesson 1, and we're going to do a little bit of typing here. Let me save this off as module1.py. Okay, now we have my Python syntax highlighting. Try and make that a little bit bigger for you. So in the previous lesson we just did a simple print. In this lesson what we're going to try to do is get some if, else, and else if kind of statements going on. So first thing I want to do is have something to compare against. This is just to familiarize yourself with the way code logic and flow works. You might be graded on your variable names or what types you're trying to compare. None of that stuff really matters. I just want you to get familiar with the Python language. If you need reference material, you should have the book. The internet is very helpful. So one thing I'm just going to do is say I have a variable. I'm going to call it foo. Foo is going to equal 0. I'm going to have another variable. I'm going to call it bar. Bar is going to equal 1.0f. So I have a float, have an integer, and I'm going to have a string too. So what happens if I run this at the command line? Well, I'm going to go Python module1.py. I have a syntax error. Do I need the F? I'm not sure. It's been a while. Okay, you apparently don't need the F to declare it as a float. Just have a decimal. It must pick float or double for you automatically. There you go. So I'm going to say if foo is less than bar, print foo less than bar. Something has happened to my white space and tab. Is it there? Alright, it's there. I can see it. It's very tiny. Else, if foobar is equal to foo, that shouldn't happen. Okay. Else, nothing. Alright. So I got some if, elif, else going on here. Not really gonna hit every line, obviously, in this exercise, because as soon as it hits one of these conditions, it's going to resolve. So this is essentially one block. I will never ever see more than one of these print statements get printed, because if this if statement is true, this is going to be what's printed, and then the code flow is going to continue down here. I'll go ahead and make that readily apparent. Put a little done line at the end here. So if this elif block is true, it's going to print this, and then it'll be done. If neither one of these is true, the if was false, the else if was false, it's going to print the else, and then it's going to be done with that if else block. So let's go ahead and save it, give it a run, see what happens. I have a syntax error, of course. I don't need like an if, then for anything, do I? My brain has been distorted with Ruby. What do I need? Like, no. What is going on here? So I'm going to try and fix this relatively quick. The magic of a colon. So you need a colon apparently after these things. That syntactically makes no sense to me, but it's okay. I didn't make the language, I just have to use the sugar that it gives me. Alright, so now I have foo less than bar. They're not even the same type. I just compared foo with bar, and it printed it out. Hey, foo is less than bar, and then done. Well, I kind of want to get this shouldn't happen to print, but I'm going to have to change something. So I'm going to say if foobar is equal to foobar, then I'm going to have to switch this operator around just for demonstration purposes. So now we know that 0 is not going to be greater than 1, but foobar, as a matter of fact, does equal the string foobar. So I'm going to change it to this should happen, and then it's going to print this should happen, and then done. Alright. And that's exactly what we have. We have hello world, this should happen, and then done. Getting there. So now let's go ahead and use the not equals operator. Not equals foobar. So this is going to be false. Foo is not greater than bar. Foobar actually does equal foobar, so that's not going to be true. So we're going to fall to this else statement. It's going to say nothing. So here we go. Nothing. Done. Alright. In theory, this would be all you need to do for lesson 1, but I really want you to understand what occurs inside of if and elif blocks. This is very, very primitive stuff. We're going to need this throughout the entire class. So what I want you to do is realize that in Python and in most programming languages, you have operators like that's the less than operator, that's the greater than operator, this is the less than or equal to operator, greater than or equal to operator, that's equal to, this is not equal. Those are pretty simple and straightforward. So one thing that you can do is chain them together. So you can say things like if 1 is greater than 0, before I go typing any further, when you chain them together you're going to use more Boolean logic gates. So you can have double ampersand is and, double vertical bar is or, and I'm sure it's probably not that in Python, so it's going to make a fool of me. If 1's greater than 0 and 2 is less than 3, we're going to print, hey, we did it. Alright, pretty simple. Also, something important to note in Python is a multi-line comment is triple quote. So I just want to comment out all these useful things, triple quote them, they're all commented out now. Okay, let's go ahead and run this again. Of course, they have a syntax error. It's probably just one and it is just one and probably a single vertical bar is an or. Let's go ahead and try to expand on this. Or, actually I think it is or a keyword? Oh, or is a keyword. I bet and is a keyword too. So we'll have to check into the order of operations, because I know in Ruby, the words themselves are lower precedent on the order of operations than the symbols. So we'll just do or something else. Or 1 equals 1. So let's go ahead and make this statement false. So we know that this block here is going to evaluate to false now. So is 1 greater than 0? Yes, that is true. But then we have this and. So and 2 has to be less than 1. So this is false right here. but that doesn't matter. We're in one big parenthesis, so we have to evaluate this other thing because this is an OR. So Boolean logic states that false and false, that equals false. Okay? True and true, that's equal to true. But when you have a false and true, that's going to equal false. Okay? Because both of these statements have to be true because of this and keyword. On the other hand, if we have true or false, that's going to equal true because only one of these sides has to be true. Okay? So if we have a statement that's true and a statement that's false, but they're separated by the or keyword, it means it can either be true or false. It's going to pick true. Okay? Another thing is false or false. That equals false because neither one of them are true. None of the statement is true. So it's going to be false. Okay? And true or true, that's going to equal true. And the compiler actually shortcuts these things too. So whenever you have an OR statement, the compiler does what's called short-circuiting. If you want to know a little bit more detail about that, it's going to evaluate this first statement as soon as it sees this OR. So it says, oh, well, this was true. I don't need to evaluate the second statement because it's an OR. It doesn't even care. It won't even read that thing. And then it'll just be true. So let's go back to our line of code here. Let me put this inside of our comments so we can keep it for later. I'll make sure to post all this stuff up on the website too, so you guys can see the logic and stuff. So we have if 1 greater than 0, that's true, but for this entire block to be true, we have this and here. So this has to also be true. 2 less than 1, that's false, okay? So that false is going to cascade up to make this entire logic block false. So we have false. Okay, so we have false or 1 equals 1. That's true. So we have a false or a true. That's going to equal a true. So we're going to get to print out this, hey, we did it. And then we're going to go ahead and evaluate this again. And it's going to print done at the end. So let's see what happens. So it does. It says, hello world. Hey, we did it. Nothing. Done. So that's pretty much all the basics that you're going to need to know for logic control. If, elif, and else. There's another statement later for logic control. We're going to cover it in module 2. It's called a case or a switch statement. I call them switch statements, but I think both would work. That concludes lesson 1.